Guy, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's good to be with you, Diana.
So today we're going to start off with just a brief overview of DISC. I know hopefully all of you have gotten an opportunity to take the free assessment tool and potentially had taken the full assessment. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Guy, to talk a little bit about what the DISC is, what it means, and how students can use it.
Well, it's a good question. It's a good starting point for developing greater emotional intelligence and ability to communicate with people who, particularly when they're different from you. The DISC model is, the official name is the DISC model of human behavior. Colloquially or commonly, people talk about it in terms of being a personality assessment. Technically, that's not accurate. There are many other elements besides a person's behavior that go into their full picture of their personality. The DISC model really is limited to behavioral tendencies, behavioral traits, behavioral patterns people would likely exhibit as they interact in the world, do things, approach tasks, those kind of things. It's described in a 4-quadrant model where we take an axis of 2 drives, put the axes parallel to each other, and the 2 axes then create 4 quadrants. So the 2 axes that go into the DISC model are the pace drive, or if we're drawing it on a piece of paper, we would draw that as a vertical line top to bottom on the page. The upper half of that line would represent what we call the outgoing pace, and the lower half representing the reserve pace. So that's the terminology we use, outgoing versus reserved. And
Actually,
that pace drive is related. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to announce to the class that I did send around via email the document that you shared. So you're describing sort of, and it's right here, you're describing sort of the visual axis. So if you open up your email, you have it with you as well, so you can look along.
Oh, thanks, Diana. That's great. That'll help a whole lot. So this vertical axis is the pace drive, and the pace drive is related to speed or intensity, level of engagement, decision-making pace, comfort with making decisions with limited information, that type of thing. So the upper half of this line, we say, represents the outgoing pace, which is a faster pace, typically comfortable with less data before making a decision, typically comfortable moving faster and engaging more quickly in both situations and interactions with people. Lower half being reserved or slower paced. And key there is faster and slower, not fast and slow. So we're not making absolute judgments, we're making comparative evaluations. Slower pace meaning wanting a little more information prior to making a decision, probably a little slower to engage, especially in new situations or with new people, that kind of thing. So the outgoing pace and the reserve pace, that represents the 2 extremes, the 2 ends of that line. And both drives that we talk about here, both the pace drive and the priority drive we'll talk about in a minute, are really lines of continuum, meaning we move from one to the other gradually. It's not like if a person is out, every single outgoing person isn't exactly the same. Some people are super outgoing. Some people are a little bit outgoing. Some people are super reserved. Some people are a little bit reserved. So that it's gradually moves from one side to the other. It's not just an automatic shift. And then the other drive is the horizontal axis. That's the priority drive. And the priority drive is related to the direction people tend to think first, and so it shows up in how they approach what they do. With regard to their focus on task on the left side of this line, or people on the other side of the line, task-oriented focus will be focused on form, function, process, analysis, data, a more factual approach to things. And people-oriented side to be more connected and focused on sharing, caring, interactions with people, building relationships, those sorts of things. More of a relational approach to things. And again, that's a line of continuum, so people gradually move from one side to the other as we position ourselves on that line. And really there's a blending of these traits. They're not absolutes. They're the key word we use is tendencies, preferences. Don't like to make absolute decisions about it. Then you put the quadrants together and you get the 4 quadrants of behavior, and you have the combination of outgoing and task-oriented driver gives you the dominant trait, and there's some descriptive words on the chart there. So the behaviors you'll tend to see with a person who has a lot of that drive would be dominant type behaviors, meaning taking charge, direct, demanding, decisive, quick to take action, that kind of things. outgoing people-oriented trait would be inspiring and really focused on interacting with people, connecting with people, sharing stories, sharing experiences. Those types of things would be a common behavior you would see, set of behaviors you would see come out of people that have that driver. Lower right-hand quadrant would be a supportive driver, meaning the person has a lot of this drive would what you'd notice is a lot of helping and supporting type behaviors, typically focused on building and protecting relationships is a primary focus for a person that has a lot of this trait. And then the lower left-hand quadrant would be the task-oriented task-oriented reserved trait. And the key word there, the primary word we use to describe that trait is cautious. Tends to be very careful and engaging with things, likes to collect information, analyze, structure, organize, that kind of thing. So we have these 4 quadrants of behavior, and these become tendencies and typical behaviors people would exhibit. And very few people have only one of the traits represented in their comfort zone. Most people are a blend. And so a common question is, well, could I have some of 2 traits or some of 3 traits? And my answer is, yeah, probably true. Not only could you, it's likely. About 80% of people would say that 2 of these traits are very strong for them. Probably around 15% of people would say that 3 of the traits are very strong for them. And really only about 5% would say, yeah, pretty much only one of those traits describes me. It's a pretty rare occurrence. So most people are a blend of these things to greater or lesser extent. And so what it will tell you, it will tell you a person's tendencies, preferences, how they might behave in certain situations or how they're typically going to behave across a range of situations. What it won't tell you anything about their intelligence. It won't tell you anything about their ability or capability to do a job. It won't tell you anything about their skill sets or things they've learned. It won't tell you anything about their emotional intelligence. So you could have a person with dominant traits who has very high emotional intelligence and understands how to adjust themselves to different situations and different people. Or you could have a person with dominant traits who has almost no emotional intelligence and never adjust at all. So the traits are not connected to emotional intelligence. They're just tendencies and preferences. And I like to say that I prefer, rather than to talk about people being dominant, inspiring, supportive, or cautious, I'd rather say that I observe behaviors that are dominant, inspiring, supportive, or cautious, and then use the DISC model like a filter to understand how to connect with people in better ways, rather than as a label to judge or categorize people. So big picture, that's the DISC model, and probably the most effective thing is for us then to go into some dialogue about how to use it and what to do with it and those kind of things.
Yeah, so great, thanks for that. So my key takeaways are that people are typically a blend, that it's not necessarily one attribute, one sort of concentration of behaviors. That I also heard a little bit that it could be situational, and you tell me that
it can be.
That people sometimes, because of this blend, they might revert to what their their preferences, their tendency, but they have the ability to flow into these other and sort of use these other behaviors as well, of course, right? Is that true?
Yeah, those are 2 really key points. One, you hit on really, really important points. People are typically blends, as you said, and a person's behaviors are probably situational, and all of us will tend to have like a home base or a comfort zone where we might gravitate to if we're not thinking consciously about adjusting or haven't developed a certain set of behaviors in a given situation. So we can probably demonstrate any of the behaviors if we choose to. There are just certain of them that'll tend to be more comfortable to us and will seem a little more natural.
Okay. So can I ask you what your DISC profile is as a recovering engineer?
Well, my primary trait is the cautious trait. I have fairly strong blending of the dominant and supportive traits also in my blend. I have almost none of the inspiring trait, which what that turns into is, by nature, I really don't like to talk with people. My preference, my perfect comfort zone is to be completely by myself. So that says a little bit about where my focus is. And sadly, I'm not terribly motivated about whether people like me or not. So
So, but how has that worked out for your career trajectory? Because you are obviously a very successful consultant who works with people as your profession. Your whole job is really coaching and working with people and allowing them to use this tool to inform how they behave, how their teams work together. So I imagine that you have to kind of tweak yourself. So how does that work, and how have you maybe used what you now know about yourself through the tool and just self-reflection to think about your leadership development?
This is a really good question. I started right out of college, went into the Navy, a submarine officer, and so I moved into leadership roles almost immediately out of college. And then from college, I went in the chemical industry, and only really had 1 year as an individual contributor, moved into leadership role, again, almost immediately. And what I noticed is that the formal training I had had education-wise from college, the bachelor's and master's in chemical engineering and then nuclear power school from the Navy, taught me a whole bunch of information about how to do technical things, which was very comfortable for me. It's my comfort zone. Then in a leadership role, I found that I had to interact with these humans. And everywhere I went, there were humans. And I had no training in how to deal with them. And so I started my leadership journey thinking there was something wrong with all these humans I was dealing with because they had these emotions I didn't understand. And, it was driving me crazy. And I realized there was a series of events, kind of a long journey over a number of years actually. I started having experiences and realizing maybe it's not all these other humans that are the problem. Maybe it's how I look at these humans that's the problem. And I've managed to meet some mentors who gave me some feedback and some perspective, introduced me to some information, started reflecting on how I could improve my interactions with people, and it turned into that the analytical problem-solving side of my brain turned into a study of people and human behavior and neuroscience and psychology and all those kind of things, communication skills. Turned into a love of understanding that, and found that as I got more successful with people, I got more successful in general. And then it just became something that I started studying a great deal because I wanted to learn more and get better and continue growing and developing and becoming better as a parent, as a husband, as a business owner, as a business leader. I just wanted to get better at working with people.
That's really fascinating. So you essentially identified an area of growth opportunity, and you used your other strengths, so your analytical ability, your detail orientedness, your, I guess, cautious, sort of that strength to then resolve and really put into action strategies that would help you be more supportive, inspiring, and sort of on the people-oriented side. That's really interesting.
Yeah, well summarized, Annie, because that's one of the things that, and there's some work by the Gallup organization. Marcus Buckingham did some work, and the first book that I read of his was First Break All the Rules, and then the next one was Now Discover Your Strengths. And part of the research they did said that people who become successful in leadership roles aren't people who focus on turning their weaknesses into strengths. They're people who learn how to use their strengths to greatest benefit. And what you just said is that's exactly the idea I have. So I'm going to use the strength I have to help me understand how to be more effective in other areas. I haven't become an inspiring person. I've worked really hard to understand inspiring people, though, so that I can hear them differently, understand their perspective more clearly, that kind of thing. Nobody would ever think I'm a great, fun-loving, tell stories kind of guy. They look at me and go, yep, he's pretty serious.
So if you're putting yourself in the shoes of our class, which I told you a little bit about our class, it's full of a pretty diverse set of students, some who have started their own nonprofits, some and want to grow those, some that have a vision and a desire to start their own nonprofits, others who just want to advance within the nonprofit sector as leaders and be president and CEO one day. So it's a diverse group, and they're all aspiring to sort of further their own leadership development and really understand what effective leadership looks like. So how would you use the DICS tool to start informing what one might do in their reflection process as a leader?
That's an excellent question. I'd really propose there's like a 4-step process conceptually. First step is you have to really understand yourself. What are your strengths? What are your blind spots? I prefer to use the word blind spot to weakness just because it gives me the opportunity to adapt for it. So your strengths, your blind spots, what do you do naturally well? Where do you struggle a little bit? Understand yourself really, really well. The DISC model is a good starting place for that. There are other tools also. There are 360 assessments. There's feedback from mentors and coaches. A lot of other ways you can do this. The DISC model is one really good place to get the objective information that's not filtered through maybe some bias of another person. So you start there with the self-awareness, and then you start understanding tools like this one as a way to understand people who might be different from you and try to understand their perspective a little bit. I'm not suggesting you have to become that person. It's really important you have to start to understand them. So here's maybe an illustration outside the DISC model that's kind of a parallel. At the moment, my wife is on her way to Germany. She's flying to Germany because I have 2 daughters there, and a son-in-law and a granddaughter. The one daughter and her husband live in part of Germany. Another daughter is in Berlin with her study abroad semester this semester. So my wife is going over to spend some time with them. Well, she's going to land in Germany, and her native tongue is English. It's her comfort zone. Under pressure, that's probably where she'll revert. And when she's trying to make a transaction in the German economy, she just might have to speak some German. So she doesn't have to become a German citizen. She does need to learn how to translate her thoughts into the way another person might to verbalize that thought. So she'll go to German as another language. Same kind of idea here with the DISC model. The dominant English language is different from inspiring English language or any other language. So it becomes a way to adjust your communication style. For example, my natural communication style is very logical, analytical, factual. Well, one of the things I've had to learn how to do is to tell stories to illustrate points. That's not my natural tendency. It's something that I know helps, especially with people who are more people-oriented, to hear a story so they can relate to the experience. So understanding yourself, then you start to understand other people, and using the DISC model as like a guide, you can then learn strategies for adapting your natural communication or your approach so that it's easier for the other person to receive what you have to say.
So you said a 4-step process. I counted 2, but are
Oh, I'm sorry. It's understanding yourself, understand the model, understand where others are in the model, and then adapt yourself to them.
Oh, okay. So adapt. Got it. So now we want to move into a few questions before we invite Maria to join the conversation and talk about her results and what they mean for her. So we're going to go to Twitter and see what students have been asking. So this is a really good question from Rocio, who's also here in the studio. Can your results from the DICSC change over time for the same individual?
Typically, no. Although there's a qualifying statement here. Really, when you take a deeper look at the DISC model, there are 2 sides of it. There's your environmental response, and then there's your natural response. And that wouldn't be revealed by the free assessment. The paid assessment goes more into detail on that. Your natural response is the part of you that's probably fixed in your behavior by the time you're about 5 to 8 years old. Now, there's a huge debate in the human behavior psychology world, this nature versus nurture thing. And most of the studies I've read basically say that your behaviors are about 50% heritable, 50% learned, which says they're both nature and nurture. So somewhere in early childhood, relatively fixed comfort zone. That doesn't mean you can't change it and grow over time, but there's going to be a place that's kind of like where you go naturally. That's your internal style. Then the external style is more how you've learned to adapt to the world. And that part of you is the external behaviors people see, which is different from how you're interpreting the world internally. I'll use myself as an example. I'll go do training, and I'll spend the day telling stories and laughing and smiling and talking with people. And I have actually had people say to me, well, you don't look like you're a cautious person. You're expressive. You're using your hands. You're smiling, and you're telling stories. You're inspiring. I go, no. No, I've learned how to behave like an... I'm really tired, as a matter of fact. So I have learned to tell stories and smile and laugh and have fun with people. That's not my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So the external part of me, I've learned how to adjust. The internal part really doesn't change much. So when we ask, can you change over time? What's probably happening is the external adaptive behavior is changing, even though the internal natural comfort zone is staying in basically the same area. Does that help clarify it a bit?
Yeah, it does for me. Here's another question from Carla Jones Adams. And I'm going to tag on another question, which I think a lot of the students would be interested in. But her question are, what are the success rates of different personality types in the working field? And the question I'm going to add is, are nonprofit leaders or leaders in general, do they typically have a mix of the DISC? Is there some trend around that piece? For example, I can imagine that leaders might have more of a dominant behavior comfort zone, but that's just my own assumption, and that may not be true, but I'd just be interested in the data.
So in terms of success, I don't know of any study that indicates any style is more successful than another style. So, and I'm going to say what my belief is based on my work, not based on a population study. Mm-hmm. My belief is that anyone of any style can be successful when they understand themselves well enough to know how to use their style to greatest benefit and adjust to fit situations appropriately. When they become in charge of their style rather than the style being in charge of them. Does that statement make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So, your recovering engineer pathway kind of example is a clear one for that, which is that you obviously had technical talent and strong abilities there. You were given leadership opportunities where you had to work and engage with people, and you used your awareness and your strengths to respond and sort of engage and learn and grow so that you can work with people, which is a key part to your success, right? Is that kind of...
And that's, yeah, exactly. Because I can think of examples of all four styles who have been successful leaders. Mm-hmm. So if you can go back to some famous people like Norman Schwarzkopf, probably a lot of dominant trait. Winston Churchill, probably a lot of inspiring trait. Supportive trait. Mother Teresa, Abraham Lincoln, probably a lot of supportive trait.
Yeah.
Cautious trait, probably Colin Powell, possibly Barack Obama. I mean, so
yeah.
I don't think any style has a monopoly on success. It's just a matter of knowing yourself and knowing how to adjust. Now, I think there might be, that your tag-on question, there might be a tendency towards the people side of driver for people who move into leadership roles in like people service type of organizations. Probably because that's where they're driven to apply their talents. Mm-hmm. And there's probably a higher percentage of task-focused leaders in organizations that are more driven by organization and structure and technical details to be successful. But that's really more a driver of the particular environment and what probably attracts people to that in the first place.
Right.
More than it's an indication of whether they could have been successful had they chosen to apply their talents.
Okay, great. I'm going to take one more question before we bring on Maria. So here's one from Jonathan, and he asks, does DISC come with a leadership training program for employees, or what kind of, I guess, leadership training or development in a structured way goes with this tool, or just generally maybe in your work as well?
Yes, the short answer is yes. There are programs designed to use the DISC model as a foundational piece to teach leadership, communication, even conflict resolution. So there are structured programs that do go into using the DISC model in particular applications. Because really, in a lot of respects, the DISC model is just a tool. Mm-hmm. It, in and of itself, is meaningless if we don't know how to apply it.
Right.
So the application comes into how do we take this tool and become more effective communicators? How do we take this tool and use it to become more effective in our leadership role, to become better coaches for people on our team, to understand motivational preferences and how to connect with them? So all of those are applications, and yes, there are programs that are designed to take the tool and apply it in those ways.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a recommendation of one if our students were interested in taking one?
For the most part, the Kevin Eikenberry group offers training programs, and most of those are really fit to the organization. So okay. It's not an off-the-shelf thing, but typically they're modified to fit specific situations, specific organizations, okay. So that you take in the whole cultural context of the organization, those kind of things, mm-hmm. to make sure that there's good training involved. And then there are public workshops available mm-hmm. all over the place, actually.
Okay. When you're thinking about the tool in terms of organizational development and culture, there's another question here. Mm-hmm. I can't remember who asked, but it was about, is this a tool that's used in hiring practices? Have you seen it used in that way? Or not really? It's more like when an employee gets hired and for their leadership development and sort of awareness of how they interact with others.
Well, it can be used as part of a hiring process. You have to be careful with it, because there's a couple of steps you have to go through to do it well. You know, one thing I would say is I wouldn't ever want to use the DISC model as a filtering tool, saying that I refuse to interview or talk with people unless they have a particular trait or style blend. That's not really, that's over reading the applicability of the model. Mm-hmm. But the way to use it successfully is to use the concepts of the model to assess the role that a person's likely to be in, to assess both the environment and the types of tasks they have to perform, and the type of environment they work in as they perform them, and basically profile the role according to the DISC model.
Okay.
And then to use that to see if you can find a fit between people in the role, and this is after you've evaluated, do they have the right training and skill set and all that. You're looking more for ideal fit. Say you had 3 candidates that might all fit. Who's likely to be the most comfortable in our environment, in our application of this job? So you can use it that way to do like a final, where's the person who's likely to fit in our team and in our organization the most successfully. Okay. So not as a qualifying tool, but as a fit tool. You can use it that way.
Got it. Great. Okay, so we're going to invite Maria to come and join the conversation. Thanks so much.
Great.
Thank you, Maria, for volunteering. You're a brave student to be up here with us and share your results. So tell us a little bit about, you did the free assessment, the free DISC assessment, and what did it tell you about yourself?
Well, it gave me a result of dominant and supportive, mm-hmm. in a blend of dominant and supportive, mm-hmm. which I could totally relate.
Yeah.
Yes, I would have expected to have more inspiring, but then I guess I'll have to work harder on that. Okay. That's going to be a takeaway from now on. But it was very reaffirming of what I know about myself, mm-hmm. and very easy to take, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. light and
Yeah.
it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. I thought it was really interesting also, just a side note, about how the questions were framed in terms of what do you like most and what do you like least. And I found, at least for myself, that some of those were really hard to choose between, rather, that I could have chosen 3 of these, you know. So I thought that was interesting.
What helped me when I had those doubts, I really try to picture myself and really like, not what I should do, but what I would really, really do. Like, what would I really, really do if I was here in this situation?
And what do I really, really enjoy? Like, yeah, I think I could be good at X, or yeah, maybe I've worked hard at really doing Y, but what do I actually like, and what do I actually feel good in? So yeah, you're right. That really did help me too. So dominant and
Can I make a comment?
supportive.
Can I make a comment here real quick?
Yeah.
You raised a really interesting observation, and I'll just say what happens for most people. Most people find it easier to answer the least question than to answer the most question. That's a generally true thing. And when we start looking at this comparison, the internal versus external style, when we start looking at 2 different graphs, we'll chart the external style from your most likely behavior choices, and your internal style comes from the least choices.
Interesting. Okay.
Because it tends to be more consistent for most people. Because of exactly what you said. Well, I could be 2 of them.
Yeah.
Which one do I choose first? I don't know.
Yeah.
Depends on the situation.
Right. Okay. So so you said this really resonated with you.
Oh, yes.
Just so that we're all sharing and being transparent, as Guy was, I also took the free assessment, and I turned out to be dominant. And what would you guess, actually?
Inspiring.
That's not true.
You're probably dominant and cautious.
So, Guy, what do you think? You have 1 down. You have 2 options: cautious or supportive.
Actually, I would say my guess is probably dominant, cautious, supportive, or dominant, supportive, cautious. Some kind of blend of those 3. That's my guess.
Okay.
Maybe supportive too.
I'm cautious, dominant and cautious, but you're probably right, because I think there were probably a couple of questions where I was torn, and I sort of I chose the sort of data-driven analytical choice because I think I like to think of myself in that way, and I admire that quality, and I think I maybe probably overstretched on that front. But
when I looked at my results, also, I don't know if it has to do with being successful at what you do, or I do this because I am fit for it. Because I had told you before, I'm a special ed teacher, and it totally to be a teacher, and especially to be a special ed, you need to be dominant, because you need to be in charge of your class,
right?
And then, but you also need the supportive, the sweet, the appreciation, the security. So all that it was really an excellent tool.
Yeah.
for me.
Okay. So you mentioned a little bit about how you want to be more inspiring.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about why you think that is, and how you might use your strengths in the dominant and the supportive areas to think about, if you wanted to be more inspiring, how you might go about that.
Well, definitely, because I like making a difference in being a leader, in being in the nonprofit world. We want to make a difference, and so that's why I would like to be more inspiring, to make a difference in others. So I guess.
So sorry, just to dissect that a little bit, because you imagine being inspiring as a way to persuade people and influence people and get them on your team. Is that what you mean?
Yes. Well, according to the traits, the descriptive words, that's why I would like to be more inspiring, because it says like interactive, involved, and so I guess I would have to cultivate those behaviors, like be more involved and be able to, persuade others and make a change. So that's why I wanted to be. And also, going back to having a class or working with other people, you want to be inspiring.
Yeah.
You want to make a difference.
Yeah.
So that's
Guy, what do you think about that? Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great direction. I'll just make one little tweak, and it sounds a little bit like semantics. I offer it as a way, to offer hope. I suggest that people learn to put on behaviors rather than to be a different style.
Yeah.
So it's a little subtle difference. Like, for example, myself, this inspiring trait, this go make friends and shake everybody's hands and be friendly. Oh my gosh. My head would explode.
But I guess in terms of the
I'm not going to become a person who enjoys that. That's not going to happen. I can learn how to exhibit those behaviors when the situation demands it.
Yeah.
Realizing that it's probably going to be a little bit uncomfortable, and rather than pulling back from the thing that's uncomfortable because it's uncomfortable, push forward because I know that this is the direction I need to go. And that's basically what I heard Maria saying too. So I want to learn how to put on those behaviors. I just want to suggest, don't try to become that person. Learn how to behave like that person.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm probably in the same boat. So I think, the Inspire is people-oriented and outgoing. So that's extrovert, relationship building, inspiring, influencing others, persuading others. And that's a key part of how we think about leadership and leadership development. So, but I, like Guy, is saying, I won't ever be naturally that way, and I probably won't be naturally ever the best in that ever. So I'll surround myself with other people who are really great at that, one, and who can help me be better at that. But two, I'll also think about very concrete things that I can do that are sort of more, digestible than being inspiring. That's like overwhelming. But for example, I hate networking. I hate networking events. But I've read a lot about how you can go into a room where you don't know any people and kind of identify a group that's not gelling, go to that group and start talking about something. Another leadership development coach actually recently talked to me about how you could make it a connector game for yourself. So for example, I'm not comfortable networking for networking's sake, for increasing value to myself, for the business, for making connections and relationships. That feels superficial to me, really. But what she was saying was, think about it as an opportunity to connect people, to add value to other people. And you making those introductions, is really great for those individuals, but it's also great for you because people see you as a connector. They want to be connected. They want to then connect you to more people. So that actually, it was like a light bulb moment for me because it was concrete. It was a concrete frame that actually made networking feel less superficial and exhausting and more meaningful because it was about other people, which is important to me. Do you know what I'm saying?
And that was actually one of the questions in the DISC. If you walked into a place, right. So, and I think at that moment, that's when I thought, well, it doesn't say I would never do that or I couldn't do that. It just says I would be least likely to do it or most likely to do it. That would be my tendency. So it's kind of flexible. Sometimes you would do it if you had to, and you're capable and able to do it. It just wouldn't be your natural, choice. And I also was going to say that though I looked initially at just the descriptive words, also the needs are very important because it's kind of a self, So and the needs totally resonate. I have no need for, approval, popularity, those kind of things. If I get a grade, if I don't, great. I do need challenges. I do need choices and control. I'm a control freak. Totally a control freak. That's a big part of my personality. And also, I do need appreciation. More than validation or recognition, appreciation to me, I'm like solidarity. I'm all about, I love you. I'm a hugger. You're doing great. And affirmation, security, is this going well? Because I think through affirmation, you can sometimes change course. Is this going well? No, not really. Oh, we need to find another way.
Right.
And yes, we all have. I did find myself in some of the other areas. In the other inspiring and cautious. Very little. The cautious side. Yeah. Very little.
So we could make a good team.
Yes, I'm a people person. I am a complete personable. I love contact, interaction. Even if I do online, I come to every class. I like to talk to the teachers. I love meeting people. So it's about also your needs. You should look at that as well.
No, that's a great point.
Guy, I'm really glad you raised that point, Marie, because that is such a huge point. To actually get to the place where we look past the behavior and start to understand the needs, both for ourselves and for other people. And it actually builds on something Diana said. So if I want to position myself to behave in more appropriate ways in situations where I'm not really comfortable, what I heard Diana do basically is convert the behavior needed into the situation into something that would feed her needs. So now she can do it feeling authentic and genuine rather than fake.
Right.
So I'm adding value, which is a cautious need. I'm adding value to the situation so that I can do this behavior. Now I'm okay with it. It's not superficial. It's valuable. And just reframe the situation to feed your need. So that's one way to help you personally do what needs to be done. Find a way to frame it so it feeds your need. It's also important to realize that if things are at the need level for us personally, they're at the need level for other people too. So here's from a leadership perspective, a really important observation. Like Maria said, I share that perspective, like the need for recognition and approval. I could not care less. People come to me after a training session and say, "Guy, you're just the funniest guy in the world. We didn't learn much, but you're funny." I go, "You've got to be kidding me. What? I don't care if I'm funny. You need to learn something."
Right.
But there are people who, just because I don't need to be liked or don't need to be recognized, it doesn't diminish the fact that they need to be liked and they need to be recognized. So from a leadership perspective, I can learn to give to people what they need rather than what I need. So that they can feel fed in the workplace and feel engaged and motivated and inspired to do what needs to be done. And so that's kind of the leadership application. I'm so glad you raised that, Marie, because it's a really, really important point.
Yeah, really great point. So we're gonna just spend a few minutes on the 360 assessment that I helped Maria do as well, which was a different assessment tool. So as Guy mentioned, there are a number of tools out there, and the 360 is a way to evaluate yourself on certain key areas. There are two broad areas: learning to learn and learning to lead. So within learning to learn and learning to lead, there are some other key areas. Seeks opportunities to learn, seeks and uses feedback, learns from mistakes, open to criticism. That's all under learning to learn, right? All of those things are important. Seeking opportunity, using feedback, learning from mistakes, open to criticism. Then under learning to lead, it's about committed to making a difference. Insightful. Do you ask insightful questions? Do you see things from different angles? That you have the courage to take risks. That you bring out the best in people. That you act with integrity. That you seek broad business knowledge. And that you adapt to cultural differences and differences in people. So there were 50 questions, which you did for yourself, and then you had a boss, you had 4 friends or family members, and then you had, I think, 6 peers also do the assessment, and they give you sort of a 360 view of yourself. So I gave you your results. What sort of key areas, so if we're talking in Guy's language about blind spots, sort of understanding your blind spots, what were some key areas that you feel like you became more aware of about yourself?
Well, it didn't come much of a surprise, but the feedback part, or like I think what I had, the lower feedback was on the like the criticism, and it's because I'm very stubborn. I am very set. So it's not that I react bad to criticism, but I find it hard to kind of agree with the criticism. If it makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I don't get hurt. My feelings don't get hurt. But it's like, yes, but I still think that we should do it.
I see.
This way.
That's really interesting, because I probably in some part of my life, was closed to criticism, but it was more around because I wanted to be perfect, because I had built this like high expectation, and I'm always adding value and excellent, and so criticism to me I took personally, which I've learned and really worked with myself to be much more open to mistakes and really using them as learning opportunities. So that's been a major focus for myself. But you're saying something different. What you're saying is you're kind of
very
resistant.
determined. Yes.
You're resistant to change.
To the change.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that was one of the comments in the comment section.
Yeah.
I think one of my peers, she's
It was the
reluctant.
only negative. It was the only negative comment you had, actually.
She's reluctant to change at first, but once she has all the information, then she'll change. Because I am like going back to the DIFC, we'll have different a little bit of all the traits. So my cautious side is I will take the risk, but not a reckless risk. I take educated or calculated risks and make sure that I know what I'm doing, that I know, yes, let's go for this, because I have a vision.
Yeah.
I have it in my mind. I have a vision. But if I don't, not in the blind, not in the blind, or
not without being persuaded otherwise. So it's almost
I'm
if
difficult
I'm
to persuade though. But intrinsically though, if it's more of a will, it's more of a determination.
Okay.
If I know where I'm going, no matter what you tell me, if I see that I can do it, I'm going to do it. I'm not easy to take no for an answer.
Okay. So what I'm this is not my area of expertise, guys, so you jump in, but what I'm hearing based on, all the tools that I've gotten to the privilege to use, one tool that was really helpful to me also was around listening and being a better listener, because I think I thought at the time I was a great listener, because I like information, I like data, I like different perspectives, I like solving complex challenges with people with different perspectives. But I realized that I wasn't, because I'm on the fast pace, maybe I was always kind of moving, that I didn't take the time to always sit and actually listen. So I'd be interested to see if that might be an area for you, because it sounds like you're not open really to hearing potentially what others have to say, and their rationale and their evidence of why maybe something may be different.
I think it all has to do with my background, and what I've been successful at has been defying odds, negative odds, or negative diagnosis. For example, I work with special needs kids. If you listen to the teachers and the principals, they're going to say he's not going to make it. Yeah, it's okay. He needs to be, and I'm an advocate. So I'm more of like, no, yes, we can do it. On a personal level, my son, he's medically fragile. I came here. If I had listened to the diagnosis, I would have disconnected him at day 3 of age, and I said no, no, and he's 9 years old now. So I think it has to do with my experience, my life experience reaffirms every day.
So you really almost pride you. That's like
I am
you're very proud of
yes.
the fact that you have a strong will, determination, and
yes.
and you kind of equate that with sticking to your guns, like no matter what.
Yes,
like, no
and
matter
also
if you
being
get-
an advocate. A lot of people will tell the minorities, the special needs, or the parents who don't have the resources, or the parent who will show up for an art meeting without an advocate. They will tell them, low, you can't do this, you can't, with your circumstance. So it's been my job and my passion always to say no to that. So to be contradictory to the bad. But of course, if it's, when we had our interview this week, you did say, be a better listener. You need to be more organized. Your tendency will be to teach, kind of set back a little bit. And I believe that's also, I took that and incorporated, and you can change. But it all depends on the circumstance.
Right, absolutely.
I think,
and that's completely right. Like,
and
it's not
basically,
a blanket.
your closest people know you from your circumstances.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they're all thinking of, my advocacy, my child, my struggle coming here, to the States, and they all see that.
Right. Absolutely. This isn't a blanket statement at all. Yeah, of course.
Can I tie something together? Here's an observation, and I like to be really careful because I don't know for sure. I'm going to tell you what I heard, though, Maria, and you tell me if this is pretty close. So you have a blend of dominant supportive or supportive and dominant traits. So the dominant trait would be characterized by taking charge, setting goals, overcoming challenges, not taking no for an answer. The supportive trait would be characterized by taking care of people, protecting relationships, caring for others. And what I heard you say is that that the combination of these drives shows up that I didn't hear you talk about overcoming challenges like solving technical problems.
Never.
What I heard you overcoming was challenges involved in protecting an individual. So you see those two traits start to come together.
Yeah,
I even saw, as you started talking about it, your energy level come up, your enthusiasm, because you're talking about things that feed your needs. And I think you said this a little while ago. Are you successful do you have these traits because you're successful in it, or are you successful in it because you have the traits?
Yes.
My guess is you're drawn to that kind of work because that kind of work feeds your needs. You feel gratified in it, satisfied doing the work. And because of that combination, I feel energized by it, it fits my needs, it's an environment I'm comfortable in, you're successful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. That's a great
Does that
summary.
tie together okay?
Absolutely, yes, it's perfect.
Yeah.
100%.
That's great. So we just have a couple of minutes. So I was looking over some of the questions from the students, and there's consensus on a couple of things. One is understanding the variety of tools out there, and if you, as a coach, a leadership development consultant, could list maybe 3 different types of tools that would give you 3 different perspectives that you would recommend. So that's one question, and then there were a set of questions about the validity of tools. So maybe talk a little bit about the validity and how the DISC is used or tested, rather.
So one tool is the DISC model. There are others that attempt to get at the same idea. Variety of tools in the arena of similar to this. There are other 4-quadrant models. There's True Colors. There's I don't even remember all the names of them. There's probably like 30 different tools that are basically the same idea. There's the Myers-Briggs assessment. The power, I think, of the 4-quadrant model, not necessarily its analytical accuracy, more its practical applicability, meaning it's pretty simple to get close and get in the ballpark without being super analytical. So tools like that are useful for self-awareness and also understanding the differences between you and other people are good tools. I think a 360 assessment is a good tool to use. 360 of some kind is a good tool. I think developing relationships with coaches and mentors is very good because, I think this quote comes from the book Crucial Conversations, but the statement is that you're on the wrong side of your eyeballs to be objective about you. And so we all need objective feedback. And tools like the DISC Model 360 assessments and mentorship or coaching relationships help give you some more objective feedback. Other tools, StrengthsFinder is the tool that can be very beneficial because it goes at it's sort of complementary to the DIFC model or tools like that help identify particular strengths you might bring to the organization. And so those are a number of tools that could be helpful for you. In terms of validity, I can't speak to all of them. I'll talk about the DISC model. It's probably about 85 or 90% accurate. And there are probably two ways you could interpret that. If you get a full report, you probably read about 85 or 90% of it and go, yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. Nope, that's not me on 10 or 15%. Yeah, because that's the variability of human beings. No report is that good. Another way to look at the 85 or 90% accuracy is that about 85 or 90% of people who read it will go, yeah, that describes me. And maybe 10 or 15% will say, no, it doesn't. Again, no tool's perfect. How is it evaluated? It's a population-based study where you look at the general tendencies of people and what percentage of people might exhibit this trait, and then in the bar graphs, if you look deeper in the assessment or the report itself, the bar graph, the midline represents basically an average intensity of this drive in a person's nature. So compared to other people who have taken this assessment, your drive in this arena is average. And if you have high drive, that means compared to other people who have taken this assessment, your driver in this area is high. Because really, when you look at a tool like the DISC model, there is no such thing as an absolute standard of dominant, inspiring, supportive, or cautious. It doesn't exist. It's not like, if you look in the physical world, we have things like the vibration of a cesium atom. The wavelength of that vibration tells us how big a meter is. Okay, yeah, that's a fixed standard that never changes. That's not true with human behavior. What we have is relative standards. People compared to other people. Where do we fit? So it's a comparative assessment that's relative in nature rather than absolute assessment that's definitive in nature. So hopefully that helps address some of the validity and understanding how to use it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Guy. I'm going to have Maria sort of have the final comment, but I want to just thank you for volunteering your time. You completely did this, unpaid, so we really appreciate your expert advice and
glad to be here.
Overview. It was really terrific. So, Maria, final question for you. As you look to your own leadership development, what's one main takeaway or one step that you're going to take using this information?
I think the most important takeaway for me would be it's not only important what describes you, but what drives you. I think that's the most relevant takeaway from me from my evaluation, and also that the tools are there, but not just use it yourself. You need to go with the person that, like the expert, to kind of guide you through the learning process. Yeah. So that's mainly it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us too.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it. All right, class, that wraps us up. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time.